Greetings everyone, welcome to my sketchbook. It's a little later in the day on Friday, actually early evening Friday. Just some running around to do. So this is an opportunity to sit down and just sort of doodle something. All right, I'm gonna zoom in here. Let's focus on this. We'll see if it'll lock down on that cover. The idea that I have floating around in my head is that, well, dragons. So I'm going to kind of rough out something here. It's not going to be beautiful because I'm roughing it out. I kind of like different versions of sketching. This is like a really fun way of just kind of getting shapes or what have you. Sometimes I will do like solid line drawings, and I'm a fan of doing that instead of like, this kind of waste. But since this is kind of like a jagged creature, this is a really neat way to just explore shapes, I think. And this style of dragon, with all these sort of stalagmites, stalactites all over it, I kind of like this. Gives you an opportunity to kind of say, well, what exactly happens during, like, the growth of a dragon? I don't really know. I think it's entertaining in some ways to think there had to be some version of something beyond just imagination that somebody would sit down and say, well, this is what, I'm going to try to get that to focus a little bit more again. This is what a dragon might look like, or this is what a dragon looks like. I find some of that stuff amusing too, though, because there's a lot of like trickery that happened with people. So you can imagine somebody traveling and going back to visit the royalty and saying, oh, I got to see a unicorn. And that, somebody would be like, well, there's no way. It's like, oh, no, I did. I did get to see a unicorn, and it bowed to me when I showed that creature your colors, your coat of arms, and all that kind of stuff. So I think the creature knew. And that person would then proceed to trade, let's say, like a castle, one of the castles for a unicorn's horn. Can you imagine? So, I mean, like, there are creatures that have a single horn. So, a rhinoceros, a narwhal. And if it's exotic enough, people wouldn't recognize, like, they might be able to look at it and go, oh, somebody carved this. But when you see a naturally formed spiral horn, well, you believe too. You'd be like, oh yes, definitely. I take your word on this, and here's a castle for you, and I'm glad you survived, and all that kind of stuff. That's amazing to me. Just adding a little bit of detail now, just for fun, with our spiky-looking dragon. It really didn't take long to get to this point. To me, dragons are representative of different creatures when I piece them together in my head. Now, this is for my own sort of thing, mind you. I often will think about chickens because I love the way birds' feet look. I think of how cats might move, iguanas and stuff too. But on top of that, horses. I like to think about horses. Let's see here. So I kind of have the neck to this point, and I'm just adding in detail with the spikiness that in some ways might even look like flames. Yes. So let's think of certain kind of anatomical parts now. If this is the neck, perhaps this creature might have some version of a collarbone. So I'm just going to kind of scratch in a collarbone there on this side. Now, I like to think of dragons having wings because that's just way more fun. But with that, I have to imagine that they don't have 6 limbs. So I like to think that wings are actually limbs, or in this case, part of their arms. So I'm going to put in a shoulder here off of this collarbone. And we'll have like the humerus super stretched out. And then from the elbow, we'll have kind of like a long forearm. And let me back this out just one level, and then we'll perhaps go back in for some more detail. We'll see what kind of awesome little mistakes are. I mean, this is just random drawing, mind you. So in your forearm, you have 2 bones. You have the radial and you have the ulna. But as I say, we're going for like super stretched out. Like that. And you'd have a wrist here, let's say. But as a bonus, because, well, the main talons I think should be the legs, I'm going to have kind of like almost like a thumb here. Going to the wrist. I'm going to have really awesome long fingers. Just like that. Now, naturally, us humans, you get the finger that's sort of broken down into 3 parts here, right? Well, imagine if you didn't have connective tissues between here that make up, the palm. Well, you'd have 4 parts. You'd have this bone, this bone, this bone, and this bone. That's kind of how I'm looking at this part, and then webbed as well. I'm just kind of making this up. So let's see, how do I want the webbing to go? Let's say kind of like this. Maybe like one of those, which kind of goes off the page now. Now, is it possible to think of, well, how would these things be attached to the body? Well, let's say along the rib cage. So we're going to go back to the rib cage here before I flesh out some more of that. I'm going to dip the pen here. Let's think of rib cage. I kind of think maybe a little bit human, well, not perfectly human, but humanistically. And unlike the back that has all these sort of like protrusions of, let's say, hardened skin and sort of like bone fragments of the spinal cord pushing out, this side would be softer, a little bit more flexible under here as well. The flesh of the back, so, pectorals we don't have to worry about, but the back here, maybe they can fan out from the deltoids. a wide-backed creature, but thin flesh. Now, as far as, rigidity or strength and skin, could be calloused. I don't know. Again, making it up. But what kind of power would you need to have to get this creature off the ground? You'd need significant power. So if it was the size of a horse, if it was the size of 5 horses, in order to make it a rideable creature, if that was necessary, that would be spectacular to see. A Komodo dragon, they can be like 5 feet long, 7 feet long. I mean, think of crocodiles, alligators. They can be 12, 13, 14, 15, maybe even 17 feet long. It's kind of scary in a weird way, thinking about that. So, let's see. What would I want out of here? So I have the underside of the neck darkened just a little bit. Now, do I want to have the other wing going? Or let's move on to the legs just a little bit more. So some of this might look a little bit like a horse, right? But let's think of pelvis. And we'll elongate this creature just a little bit here too. And I'm going to move down here just a little bit. So today, one of my favorite artists has a birthday today. I want to say happy birthday to Madeline. I hope everything is going awesome for you today. Good human. At my house, I have artwork from Madeline, who does really cool things. Let's see here. Now, because I have this sort of taking over one side of the page here. Now, it's at this point that I kind of think of how cats kind of are. I don't really have room there. So this would be the femur, and the tibia and fibula would be down here. But then, much like a cat, they have their hind legs, I should say their feet on their hind legs, are huge. They have huge feet. So you're probably not seeing that. I'm going to have a foot down here. Right here to the ball of the foot. This is always the fun part, huh? When you run out of room with certain things. It's all right, though. And look, we can even try to squeeze out a talon down here just for fun. Okay, let's make our way back. So that's kind of a long-bodied thing that I have going on here. That's funny. I'm not too ruined by it. It would be way better if the wings were bigger, but I mean, I'm just kind of working with the space that I have for something I'm just making up anyway. Let's have some more of this sort of craggly stuff going on back here underneath this part of the wing. Some hamstring, some glutes. Okay. Now, I want the tail. Maybe I'll have another leg here, and then the tail can kind of sweep out this way a little bit, as if turning. Well, let's see what we can do. I'm going to dip the pen here. And that way, maybe I can drop down this other wing to kind of go across the page up that way. So what if I had this leg here, thigh raised to here, and sort of like that knee tucked in here a little bit? Let's find out. Yeah. If I would have kind of worked that, that hip would naturally kind of roll this way a little bit too, right? So it kind of bunched out a little bit there in the pelvis. And then let's have the knee here, patella. This would kind of hunch out a little bit there too. And since I have sort of like a short break back beyond here where the lower part of the leg kind of connects, I'm going to create a kind of a shadow spot here. Like that. I'm going to have the leg kind of so roughly, yeah. Move this up a little bit again. How often do you notice that on your own body, you have like fun little moments of pain, and then you wonder, oh, maybe I'm transforming into something. How cool is that? Chances are that's not what's happening. You should probably check that out. Now, that seems a little strange, don't you think? Just the way that kind of looks. But what would I want this leg doing if the body is sort of twisted down here like that? Well, let's try to think. So, as I said, a long foot. Well, let's go with a long foot. Dip the pen. And I'm going to create sort of like a spot here. Now maybe from the foot, like a chicken's foot, I'm going to create from the heel a bonus kind of like thumb-like claw under here. That would enable us to grab onto things. A talon should be able to grab onto things. Maybe I should zoom in on that if I can. Now, of course, if this were a commissioned piece, I would have penciled in what I was kind of wanting, and that way, well, if something doesn't go quite right, I can erase it. But this is just for fun. Today is also Stacey Lynne's birthday. Happy birthday, Stacey. It's Jimmy Page's birthday. Happy birthday, Jimmy Page. So yeah, that's kind of cool. Some people having birthdays. That's almost like a little bit of trickery happening under here. And I've said this before, and I'll say it again. If you ever look at creatures or superheroes as drawn by artists, look at the artist's hands. Chances are those artists use their own hands as references on the spot. So some part of this claw probably looks a little bit like my hand. If you get a look at the work of Alex Ross, for example, and you look at the hands of Superman, even look at the face of Superman, in some ways, they resemble the artist. I mean, it just happens that way, that the references you use sometimes are the ones that you most frequently look at. So I challenge you, go get a look at Alex Ross. Go get a look at the way he draws Superman. And shablamo shazam, you might see a little bit of his face in there, a little bit of his hands in there. In my mind, I'm assuming that this creature is slightly closer, like feet-wise, and I'm kind of looking perspective off a little bit. Semi-finishing as I go. No pre-penciling as per usual. So horrible little mistakes in proportion. Yeah, whatever. That's what's happening. I'm happy to make those mistakes in my sketchbook, because it really doesn't matter in the great scheme of things. Let's move up the body just a little bit. So it's at this point here where I need to figure out, do I want to have the tail moving somewhere? So I could have it kind of sweep back here behind the legs and then back down here again. That could look interesting. You know what I mean? So that's the body. There's a twist that's happened here. Let's see what we can do. So, spinal cord. I'm moving kind of slight here. I'm kind of see the pathway. Maybe we'll get a little bit of it there, right? Now, do I want it to kind of whip out this way? Do I want it to kind of curve? Well, let's find one of those lines. Sometimes the tail could fold back over onto itself. So let's look at this side, and then because those little spiky things could go to roughly there, but let's say they go to there, they curve back in around, and then the tail twists as it comes back around this way, and then you'll get to see this mane of sorts again. So I'm going to finish my sort of reptilian tail, and then we'll put the twist in after. So here, how much do we have going on? And it can twist, right? So when I was a kid, one of my favorite types of dragons to draw, sort of like a Chinese dragon, one that you'd see if you went to a restaurant or in books. And I'm convinced that if anybody had dragons to see, it would be in that part of the world. And I'm not talking about Tartaria and that kind of thing. I'm talking about just like some of the coolest stuff, it seems. Certain parts of the world, I kind of expect that they might have had them. So certain parts of Asia, oh yeah, they probably had dragons. I see no reason why they didn't. And then when you think of like 5th century Europe, well, maybe they did too. There's no reason why they made up everything. But folklore, I think, has a little sort of basis in reality in a lot of cases. Biblically speaking, you get to hear of dragons. We already know that in our own lifetime, a lot of creatures have gone extinct. Some have been kind of forced that way, unfortunately. And there's a possibility that there were some pretty cool creatures out there. Now, I'm just sort of darkening a few things. Nothing too serious. Okay, I'm going back over here just off the hip, and we're going to let some of the spinal mane disappear as it kind of wraps in behind. We'll add a little bit of twist to shade off the dragon's behind, just like that. Let's go here to the abdomen. Okay. I'm going to add a little bit of lumpy lines here. Where are we at? We're just under 30 minutes in our doodle. Okay. Now we're looking back at the face again. Now what do we want here? Well, I've already left kind of like, more of that side profile of this creature sit this way. I could twist this part of the rib cage, which I don't think would be very difficult to do. Let me see here. What if this part of the rib cage, so let's see how I have it divided here from the sternum. I probably could create a cavity of sorts. Tricking the musculature off the rib cage. And I can put in bonus striations, which hide what my original intent might be. Not perfectly, but just for fun. And we'll twist the rib cage out a little bit here. And we'll shadow work that. Now I didn't really add a whole lot to that. But it's enough to sort of bring where I want the other part of the wing. I'm going to back this out a little bit here, if it'll let me do it. Okay. So I have this collarbone here. And comparable kind of shoulder thing going on here, which leads into a dragon armpit. I'm going to have to put a bit of a shoulder over there as well, I think. Some muscle striations. Now, I can kind of mimic that, or I can have the wing come down this way. You know what I mean? And that will give me a little bit more of this wing flap here that stretches. And I could actually have this forearm and sort of like the hands that are up here come back down. Well, let's see what happens. This is one of those things that I suppose if I were using a pencil, then it would have gone that way. Because you see what I did with the leg here. Well, I could kind of do something there, which would be, you know, I could kind of shorten or foreshorten this part of the wing, like the upper arm, and then we get more of a forearm, and then, you know, that could look cool. Let's see what happens. So I'm going to put a little bit of my shadow works here. And we're not going to get that full length because the arm is kind of being brought forward a little bit too. So it's going to widen just a little bit. And we'll kind of crease it out. Again, we're playing with perspective just a little bit. We have these forearm parts of the wing. And let's see, I'm not really letting that focus enough. I'll dip the pen. Now up here, I might kind of keep comparable lengths that I have here going from like that elbow to the hand. But it'll end up looking a little bit larger, so it's going to be, well, quite a bit larger. To get to the wrist. So it's a lot thicker, as you can see. I'm kind of using some of my own anatomy of sorts for that. Here. So that's going to be part of that hand structure here that I say that I'm just going to have more webbing. So it's going to be like more elongated. Let's have this claw-like finger overlap there. Let the material kind of stretch a little bit there. Have a chipped nail. Because, you know, we don't get pedicures and manicures as dragons. We don't have time for that nonsense. We keep our talons sharp by clawing at stuff. Yeah, that's what we do. Okay. Now from here, we're going to have from the body some of that skin. I'm really struggling with the concept of battle damage, because I want this creature to have known a free and happy life. But I mean, you could have battle damage. And I didn't perfectly plan this out as I went. I'm just letting the pen kind of dance around a little bit. Now, webbing. Well, And by webbing, I'm talking about the skin parts of the dragon. From here, down here, I'm going to attach some skin here. Now, part of this, I think, will have to end up being folds that could fly out here, kind of like a cape. But in the meantime, I'm doing that. And then back down here, we'll attach. So, got to create a bit of a shadow here in the armpit. A bit more of a shadow. Because back here, we're going to create a little bit of caping. Okay, let's add a bit more detail to that forearm of the wing structure. Let's back this out again. For our dragon buddy, I'm going to do kind of a slight outlining of sorts. And I don't think I need to go that much further with this. I think it's fine to leave ideas every so often. And if you want to go back to your sketchbook as a, well, reference of sorts, then you can do that. You probably hear me rambling on about why I do my drawings without referencing in my sketchbook. I mean, I do, if I go somewhere and I'm like, oh, I find this interesting, I'll sketch things based on other things being in front of me. I mean, I've done that with Pokemon cards, seeing that stuff for the very first time. That's really fun to do. I'm going to add some stretch and textures and veining in this wing. And that way, if I really wanted to, I can come back to that, and maybe I would use my brush and water, and I would just add a little bit of darkness to that to differentiate this from the background. So this is an interesting thing that I've scratched out here. I don't know if it's based on any dragon in particular. I can't think of any right off the top of my head, but there would probably be something that I would think in my head this is very similar to. So I am winding this down at 45 minutes. Okay. So let's see. Let's go back to the head of the dragon. I'm not as worried about this stuff. I mean, I can revisit this actually very quickly, and I'll just kind of darken in some of those lines up there and maybe add some of that texture, veining and what have you, just like that. Make sure that the webbing in between is prominent, like that. Okay, let's revisit the face of our dragon very quickly. And just add a little bit more around it. And then we'll be done. We'll be done with the dragon here on a early Friday evening. So if this is your first time here, thanks for dropping in. I do strange little doodles, sometimes just wacky things, nothing too serious. Most of the time, videos are reasonably short, but I do everything in real time, and I think for me, that makes sense to do it that way. Because I don't want to edit things so that you think that part of my process doesn't really make sense. So like sometimes on social media, you'll see somebody, they'll put out a video and you'll see from start to finish in under, I don't know, a minute. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think a lot of people's attentions in this day and age can't really sit through 47, 48 minutes of listening to somebody ramble on about stuff. But for me, this sort of thing takes me whatever amount of time this takes me, and I want to be sort of genuine in that way with what I'm doing. Now, I suppose I could edit things down, and I do produce shorts of these, but it's a snippet, so I still have no interest in editing my videos for time. So I'll put out like a snippet. Again, that's just kind of my own thing. I could say, by the way, in an edited video for time, this overall thing took me 7 hours. This overall thing took me 50 minutes. So, I don't know. We'll see. But yes, I appreciate it when you like and comment. And if you also wish, you can subscribe. And I don't know about turning on notifications, because sometimes I will produce a video like 4 or 5 days in a row, and you don't really want to have me hassling you because, you know, I wake up in the middle of the night and want to draw a picture. So that's up to you, but my goodness, just check in on me once in a while. Almost done here. I think that's it. I don't know if I want to go any further than that. I mean, what ends up happening with this sort of thing is you end up overworking something, and some part of it kind of doesn't do what you want it to do, or you just have to know when to set down the pen or the brush or whatever it is that you're working on and just say, yeah, I think that's going to be it. All right. well, get a quick look at this, and then we will say that it's done. I'm going to go to here, kind of move it around a little bit. So as you can see, I kind of elongated the body as if this thing's kind of getting ready to fly away. So this is further away than here. The way I have the lower half of the dragon is kind of closer than the head. Tail is kind of drifting back a little bit too. I would do some shading here, but I think that's it. I don't think I need to go any further than that. It's kind of a fun little thing to just sit down and draw a dragon. I like drawing dragons. They're pretty cool. Anyway, again, happy birthday, Madeline. Happy birthday, Stacey Lynne. Happy birthday, Jimmy Page. I hope everyone has a wonderful day. Thanks for hanging out. And, yeah, it's a dragon. And we'll end on this little face right here. Have a great day. Ciao for now.